This is part 2 of section 14.1. We left off with the plurality with elimination method. Yes, you do need to write all of this down. With the plurality with elimination, we're still looking for the first place votes only, but they need to have a majority. With majority, that means you have to have more than half. If nobody gets a majority, we eliminate the candidate with the fewest first place votes. Everybody gets moved up to replace those empty spots. And then we check again. We check to see if anybody has a majority of first place votes. If they do, then they're the winner. If not, we repeat the process until we do have a majority of first place winners. So we still have that same preference table. We want to figure out who wins with plurality with elimination. So we look at the first place votes. To get a majority, okay, so there's 37 people voting. So 10 plus 14 plus 8 plus 4 plus 1, that's 37 people. Half of 37, so we divide that by 2, is 18.5. So 37 divided by 2 is 18.5. And we can't have half a vote, so what we need is 19 votes. 19 is more than half. So anybody with 19 first place votes would be the winner. So that's the magic number here, 19. We've got to remember that. So we look, and Paul has 14. Sarah has 11. Don't forget about this one over here. Tim has 8. Rita has 4. Does anyone have 19? No. The most is Paul, but he only has 14. He does not have 19. So what we're going to do is we're going to figure out who has the least amount of first place votes. In this case, so we have Paul with 14, Sarah with 11, Tim with 8, and Rita with 4. Rita has the fewest number of first place votes. So she's going to be eliminated. So we're going to cross her off, cross her off. Rita is eliminated from the table. Well, this leaves some blank spaces here. We've got nobody for second choice now in this 14 ballot column. So these two people are going to get moved up one. So let me go. Rita's gone. Rita, 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 Rita. Okay. So Sarah gets moved up to second choice, and Tim gets moved up to third choice. So we have Paul. This becomes Sarah and Tim. Now for the 10 ballots, again, anybody below Rita gets moved up. So we still got Sarah at the top, but Tim is now second choice, and Paul is third. In the 8 column right here, Paul gets moved up to third choice. So Tim, Sarah, and Paul. With the 4 ballots, everybody gets moved up. So Tim now has first choice. Second is Sarah, and then Paul. And the last column, Sarah, Tim, and Paul. So now we're going to check to see if anybody has 19 or more first place votes. So Paul still has his 14. Sarah has 11. And notice Tim now has 12. So we've got 14, 11, and 12. Does anyone have 19 first place votes? No. So we have to do the process again. We have to figure out who has the least amount of first place at this point. So Paul with 14, Sarah with 11, Tim with 12. Sarah now has the least amount of first place votes with 11, so she is going to be eliminated from the table. We're going to cross Sarah out and move everybody up. So now we have Paul and then Tim. Sarah's now gone. Tim and Paul, Tim and Paul, Tim and Paul, and Tim and Paul. So now we're going to check to see if anybody has a majority of first place votes. So we stop this process when somebody has a majority. Paul still has his 14, but notice Tim now has 10 plus 8, so we have 18, plus another 4, plus 1. Tim has 23 first place votes. So with this method, plurality with elimination, Tim would actually be the winner. So notice we've had a different winner depending on how we count the votes. Paul would have won with plurality. Rita would have won with Borda count, and now Tim. The last method we're going to look at is called Pairwise Comparison. We're going to compare every candidate to every other candidate one-on-one, one by one. Yes, you have to write all this down. So we have our preference table. What we're going to do is we're going to compare two candidates at a time. Okay. If one candidate is preferred over the other candidate for all the ballots, then they are going to receive 1 point. So let's suppose X is preferred. If X is preferred, X receives 1 point. If Y is preferred, Y receives 1 point. If there's a tie, they each get half a point. Once we're done with all the comparisons, we total up the number of points, and whoever has the most points this way, that's not Borda count, whoever has the most points this way is the winner. So same table. What I need to do is compare Paul with Rita. I need to compare Paul to Sarah, Paul with Tim, Rita with Sarah, and Sarah with Tim. So everybody has to get compared with everybody else. So the first people we're going to look at is Paul versus Rita. Okay. 14 people like Paul better than Rita. Notice he's higher up in the table. Okay. 10 people like Rita better than Paul. So Paul, Rita. So 14 people like Paul better than Rita, and 10 people like Rita better than Paul. 8 people like Rita better than Paul. 4 people like Rita better than Paul. And 1 person likes Rita better than Paul. If you add these up, you get 23. This is 14. So 23 people preferred Rita over Paul. So we're going to give Rita 1 point. Now we're going to compare Paul with Sarah. So Paul versus Sarah. Well, 14 people like Paul better. 10 people like Sarah better than Paul, because she's higher up in the choices. 8 people like Sarah better than Paul. 4 people like Sarah better than Paul. And 1 person likes Sarah better than Paul. So if you add that up, 14 people like Paul better, and 23 people like Sarah better. So 23 people preferred Sarah over Paul, so Sarah is going to get 1 point. Now we need to compare Paul with Tim. Paul versus Tim. 14 people like Paul better. 10 people like Tim. 8 people like Tim. 4 people like Tim. And 1 person likes Tim. So altogether, people like Tim better than Paul. So Tim gets 1 point. So we're going to do Rita versus Sarah. And we've got 14 people that ranked Rita higher than Sarah. We've got 10 people that ranked Sarah better than Rita. 8 Sarah over Rita. 4 Rita over Sarah. So give her 4 people. And 1 person likes Sarah better. So we've got 18 people that prefer Rita, and 19 people prefer Sarah. So we're going to give Sarah 1 point. Okay. Now we have to compare Rita with Tim. Rita versus Tim. So Rita gets 14. Rita gets 10. Tim gets 8. Rita gets 4. And Tim gets 1. So we've got 28 people for Rita, 9 for Tim. So more people like Rita than Tim, so we're going to give Rita 1 point. Finally, we need to compare Sarah with Tim. So Sarah versus Tim. We've got 14 people prefer Sarah. 10 people prefer Sarah. 8 people prefer Tim. 4 people prefer Tim. And 1 person prefers Sarah, which is 25 votes for Sarah and 12 for Tim. So 1 more point for Sarah. Okay, we've made all of our comparisons, so now we just have to add up our points. And if you notice, Rita got 2 points, Sarah got 3 points, and Tim got 1 point. So since Sarah got more points than anybody else, Sarah would be the winner. Sarah is our winner. In each case, we had the same preference table. In each case, we had a different winner depending on how we counted the votes.